Boiling alive. The victim would be lowered into a large container with a boiling liquid, such as oil, gradually and slowly. The first exposed parts would be the extremities, such as fingers and toes, which have lots of nerve endings and cause incredible pain. Then the skin, muscles, and fat softened and liquefied due to the heat, while internal organs and the flesh got boiled from the outside, making this a slow and agonizing process. In another variation, which is thought to be even more painful and long, the victim would be lowered into a normal temperature liquid, which would be gradually heated until it started boiling. Keel hauling. Keel hauling was a severe maritime punishment where a sailor was tied to a rope and dragged underwater from one side of the ship to the other, passing under the ship's keel. If the person did not drown or get vital damage from the rusty and sharp wooden body of the ship itself, they would just do it again until the person was no longer alive. It was feared for its brutality. Sawing. When used as an execution method, the victim would be hanged upside down to make the blood flow to the head, increasing the time the person was conscious. The executioner would then divide the victim vertically into two halves, starting from the groin and moving upwards. Hanged, drawn, and quartered. This method was used to execute men convicted of high treason in medieval and early modern Britain and Ireland, and it consisted of multiple steps. The convicted traitor was tied to a wooden board and dragged behind a horse to the execution site. There, he was almost hanged to death, then mutilated and had his organs removed, before being beheaded and his body divided into 4 parts, just in case he was still alive. These remains were often displayed in well-known places across the country, like London Bridge, to warn others about the consequences of being a traitor. Glastration. This method wasn't always deadly, but in my opinion it deserves this spot because of how brutally painful it sounds. It's the method of inserting a glass rod into a man's erect willy and then smashing it with a hammer, causing the glass rod to fragment into multiple small pieces that shattered all over the insides. Bamboo through booty hole. A bamboo would be put inside a person's booty hole, and it would be left there. The bamboo would grow really quickly inside the man, causing incredible pain. It was sometimes left until it exited from the other side. Spanish donkey. This was a sharp-angled wooden device on which the victim was forced to sit, straddling it like a donkey, with weights attached to their feet. This would increase pressure and pain on the body, often causing severe injury to the legs and spine until the victim was ripped apart by their body weight. Brazen bull. A metal statue shaped like a real-sized bull was used to lock someone inside and then heated up with fire underneath. The person inside would feel extreme heat and pain while being burned alive, and it was meant to scare others by showing how bad the punishment could be. There were special pipes to make the victim breathe, which also made the screams hearable for the crowd, resulting in a bull-like sound. The steam would leave from the bull's nose for extra realism. Impalement. The brutal part of impaling, like crucifixion, is that the victim tortured himself. In a famous variant, he was set up high, on a stake, so that it didn't actually penetrate anything vital so long as he stayed up on his toes, so he could keep it from going any deeper so long as he kept his own weight on his feet. When the victim would get tired, he would slip a little further, and when he felt the pain, he would scramble up again on the already aching and exhausted muscles, only to repeat this process out of exhaustion a little later, and so on until something vital got pierced. Another variant consisted of the Judas chair, a torture device featuring a pyramid-shaped seat where the victim was placed at the top, with ropes used to lower and suspend their body weight onto the sharp apex. The chair would slowly rip the person apart. Flaying. Flaying was a gruesome method where the skin was removed from the body while the victim was still alive. This extreme form of torture was used to cause intense, slow pain and suffering, eventually leading to death through shock or infection. The skin, lacking major blood vessels, did not cause rapid blood loss, so victims could remain conscious and endure prolonged agony. It was often considered a meticulous process, requiring precision and skill from the executioner, and rather than removing the skin in pieces, cultures sought methods to flay the victim more efficiently and completely, sometimes using substances like boiling water to facilitate the process. Blood eagle. This one was a brutal ritual where the victim's ribs were cut from the spine and spread out to resemble wings, while the lungs were pulled through the openings, causing a slow, agonizing death. It's short, but it's one of the most brutal ones, in my opinion. Lingqi. Also known as death by 1,000 cuts, it was a famous method used in China to prolong the suffering for as long as possible. There were multiple variations of this method, even though almost all of them included cutting the skin deep enough to cause incredible pain, but not deep enough to allow the victim to lose blood. In one variation, the victim was restrained, and an executioner would pull knives out at random, each with a body part on it. Left forearm, right thigh, left foot, neck, etc. Each time he'd pull a knife out, he would make a cut on that body part. This would continue until the executioner pulled out the knife with the heart on it, and that's when he stabbed the victim through the heart. In another variation, they would tie a fishnet tightly around someone's body and cut off the pieces of skin that popped up in the holes of the net. In the most brutal version, they would bury someone up to their neck, make a cross-shaped cut at the crown of the head, peel the skin back, and pour mercury in the wound. The mercury, through its weight, would separate skin from flesh, and as the person struggled to unbury themselves, they would eventually leave their skin behind in the hole. Scaphism. This one is considered by many to be the worst execution method. In this punishment, the condemned person was placed inside a boat or between two boats, lying on their back with their arms and legs protruding through holes. They were force-fed large amounts of milk and honey, which induced severe diarrhea, and their entire body was smeared with the same mixture. This made them attractive to rodents, bugs, wasps, bees, flies, and whatever other animals lived near the lake. They would eat and bite at the victim's flesh, and when the next morning arrived, the boat would be brought back to the coast, and they would force-feed him another gigantic meal of milk and honey, also placing it on him once more. This was done on a daily basis to prolong the punishment for as long as possible. It was reported that the rats would usually try to go into the person's booty hole, and that the method was so long that it seemed to have no end, with a person surviving 17 days. This person reportedly had his entire face completely covered with wasp, and his flesh was rotting away, filled with swarms of parasites and worms, all while being covered in his own filth.